We're back with the second segment of Polygamy Today with Rebecca Kimball. Wow, you have really opened my eyes, and you have been doing a lot of research. Where is that going? And what have you researched?
When Canada had the biggest court case in the history of their country, whether or not to keep polygamy legal because it was breaking the coffers of their nation, I was one of the investigative people for them and sending them research
Oh,
for
wow.
that court case. When Warren Jeffs went to prison, the FLDS, who's in prison for life now for child molest, he raped a little girl in the temple and recorded it. Now, everybody's aware of Warren Jeffs. He was the outlaw prophet they just made the movie about. Everybody's aware of Warren Jeffs. His father performed my marriage when I was a child bride. So when Warren was captured, I worked on the computer and the phone with the detectives during his case from California here.
Really?
And I fed them a great deal of information. I wasn't the only one. And it's very important you understand I wasn't the only one, because after the Canadian court case, I met marvelous people. I met people who had escaped. I met detectives. I met mental health people. I met authors. I met people that were in the court systems. And we formed this magnificent network from Canada to Mexico, across the United States. Some of us still have never met, but we started sharing all the information we could get.
Oh, wow.
We would just fire it over the internet. Everything we had, we would do everything for everybody involved in it that we could to maximize the information, to let them know that it was an epidemic, not an isolated little group.
Right, right.
So I worked on the case, Warren Jeffs' case. Then after that, I had several people contact me for attorneys that wanted information, and I would give them all the information that I could involved in polygamy cases.
Right.
Then after Judge Waddup declared polygamy to be non-criminal, no longer illegal.
How can a judge do that?
But after he did that, I was contacted by two attorneys, and they were working together, so I worked directly after that with one.
Okay.
And I was sent Judge Waddup's 91-page court document, and I took that case apart, and it took me 2.5 months to take that case completely apart. Judge Waddup referred to cases in that court case that were twisted the way he wanted them, because he thought that the public wouldn't know. But I knew, because most of them were related to me. I knew the case.
Was this in Utah, or where?
Yes, this was in Utah. This was December 13th, 2013. Now, the point being this. Judge Waddup said, as I had told you before, that in 1945, those men went to prison in Utah State Penitentiary for religious persecution. But I produced the court evidences, the cases against them with their child brides, the Mann Act, and et cetera, for that case.
Wow.
And I also produced pages and pages more. But I didn't do all of it by myself. We had this great network. Do you remember a man called Tom Green that was television's darling, and he was on Polygamy a while back, and he had several child brides?
Yeah.
Judge Waddup said that Tom Green would never have been prosecuted by Utah law for polygamy. Never. He was prosecuted because he flaunted it on television. And in his court document, Judge Waddup said this. He said Tom Green took care of his parental and spousal obligations.
How could he know that?
Well, let's discuss what that means.
Yeah.
Parental obligations. Tom Green had 5 child brides. 3 of them were his stepdaughters. Now, where were his parental obligations when that happened? The youngest one, Linda Coons, according to the detective report, the police investigation, he was having sex with her when she was 12 years old. Now, why do I know that? Because Linda Coons is my niece. And when I went to my brother, John is her father, I said, John, why don't you do something about your daughter? Help your daughter.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said to me, you don't get it. You don't get it. If I say anything, it'll create so much trouble with the brethren you can't imagine. I can't do anything. And he did not. Now, let's talk about Tom's spousal responsibilities.
Yeah.
In my office now, I have the complete documentation of the excessive welfare fraud. He had welfare from every conceivable, imaginable, everything, even daycare centers for his kids. And his kids in each daycare center were the same kids that were in the other daycare center. And he took these little girls, these little child brides, out in Juab County, Utah, on the Utah-Nevada border, and put them in trailer houses, and he called it Greenhaven. And it was 98 miles to the closest paved road. How do I know that? Because that's where I grew up, in Trout Creek, Utah. And I always knew it was 98 miles to the closest road, and you can't walk out of the desert. Where are you going to go?
Yeah.
And these little girls, from the time that they were 12 and on up, were subjected to sex with their stepfather in the name of God. And Judge Wadditt presented that to the world as something that shouldn't be prosecuted. And that
he's probably up to something himself.
That 91-page court document took a long time to take apart.
Yeah.
Then I was asked by Stephanie Mann, who is the executive director of Safe Kids Now, which is nationwide and growing. She worked with Nancy Reagan when they were putting out the neighborhood watch stuff. And
nice.
That's her heart's desire, is that program, which is a great program. She writes books on it with, safe neighborhoods and et cetera. Anyway, she said, you're going to have an appointment and make an appointment now with Dianne Feinstein's office. So I said, okay. I said, what's happening? She said, well, we're going to do this thing for this new trafficking bill that's coming in. So
Trafficking, okay.
So I was collecting evidence, because I figured nobody believed me. I took in a folder about that thick with newspaper clippings and newspaper headlines and court cases and everything.
Right, right.
And I was going to speak on trafficking in the name of religion, because these girls are trafficked back and forth from Canada to Mexico between all these cults and across state borders, and nobody does anything about it.
Mm-hmm, right.
It's always gone on that way for generations.
Right.
So I had all this evidence, and I spoke of trafficking done in the name of religion. The other two speakers spoke of trafficking done as you would imagine trafficking is done.
Yeah.
And I put the stuff out all over the table, and we dealt directly with Jessica Glass in Diane's office. So,
And who's Jessica Glass?
She works for Dianne Feinstein.
Okay.
So what happened is that Jessica Glass, before I was through speaking, started gathering up all my papers, and she kept them. That's why I took them in there, so it's fine.
Right.
And when we left, later she talked to me on the phone, and she said, if you want something done about things and certain laws changed, you should do this, that, and the other. Well, by then, I was really burnt out. I had been staying up late at night getting all this information for those attorneys. It was just back to back on each other.
Right.
And I was really, really tired. And I had also gone back in September and met with 3 other women and hid my California car, got an old Utah car, dressed the part, and snuck back into Warren Jeff's country with a camera.
Oh my God.
And this is all on my television show, Religious Slavery.
Right.
And people were afraid to talk to me and afraid to be on camera, but they begged me to help them. They said, we can't let anybody know because it's too dangerous. But the God Squad, Warren's police, came in and shot this guy's cattle, all of them, because he didn't give up his 2 little girls for polygamous marriages. The God Squad came in and killed another guy's horses. He made his living with the Dude Ranch because he didn't jump through the hoops that Warren said.
Right.
And they said, we're terrified because we think that they knew that somebody was coming because they killed our cat this morning and it's the only pet we have. Mm-hmm. But help us, please. When we call the state police, no one will respond. They say it's not their jurisdiction and they won't do anything about it. Please, what can we do? And I put that in that video. It's called Religious Slavery. And it was rough on the edges, some of it, because it was filmed on the fly.
Right.
And the girls that were driving were so keyed up and scared. They drove so fast it was next to impossible to get some good pictures of the girls in their prairie dresses and whatnot.
Right. How can people find this video so they can see themselves?
They can get on the internet and just type in Religious Slavery, Rebecca Kimball.
So you can get on the internet and find your video so people can see for themselves.
Yes. So there are a lot of interviews that people came out and they talked to me. And I went from place to place. I was going to be gone 2 weeks. I ended up being gone 3 weeks. People met me and talked to me that I couldn't have done it without them. Mm-hmm. But the point is that I wanted to create a forest of voices because nobody hears a voice in the forest.
Right.
Nobody. But I didn't do it alone. We had this magnificent network. Anybody that was in the media or radio or anybody that dared, my friend Doris in Utah with TV20, she's really gutsy. She blasted it all over TV. Kristen Decker has a radio show. She got people to talk and interview and blasted it all over radio.
Good.
But the thing is, I got a lot of hate blogs when I came out about the truth, about the crime, about the welfare fraud, etc. in polygamy, a lot of it. But after I got back from Dianne Feinstein's office and took my little rest for about 4 weeks, I started getting magnificent email.
Cool.
The God Squad had been fired. The chief of police turned state evidence to save his behind.
Good. Oh my goodness.
And for 15 years, the federal government has ignored the fact that polygamists don't pay taxes, they just collect them. And they have ignored the fact that they didn't pay on their properties or anything. Because Warren doesn't believe in paying the government because the government's evil. And the properties are all turned over to Warren because he's God.
Okay.
The federal government, after this, the same week, foreclosed on Warren's polygamous towns for back taxes. And here's the beauty of it.
Ooh, I would love to see his face when that came down.
The glorious thing is that they gave the people that lived in those homes the right to pay the taxes if they wanted to keep their home, which would mean they would have to keep their welfare check and pay their taxes and take a stand and not give it to Warren, then they could have their home. That is benevolent. Now, I had taken a lot of flack, and a couple of threats about mentioning the fact of the extreme criminal fraud, especially welfare fraud, and I interviewed Ed Casilio while I was on this trip. He's an investigative reporter. And Ed had written an article the same week that hit the front page of the St. George News about how poor the people were, how meagerly they ate, and the welfare fraud, and that Warren was taking all the money. The same week. And then 2 days later, I get an email, and Doris on TV20, Salt Lake City, What Love Is This? Polygamy, What Love Is This? That's her show.
Yeah.
She sends me an email that I didn't even have time to read for several days. I open it up, and she's got this beautiful lead-in, but first she's got this story that they finally have a shelter to help women escape and hide from polygamy to be safe. They'll even help them escape and their children. That's never happened. Never. When I escaped, there was nowhere to go. If you went and lived in a car or something for a few days, you could lose your kids because your guy had the money.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because I have a case right now, and it's on video, where a woman, a plural wife, left her husband, who was abusive and had a criminal record for being abusive. She took her 3 children and ran to protect the children. She lived in a car for a few days and then went to live with a friend. She went back to court about the child custody, and the court took her children away and gave them back to him because he had the money. And
It's
that
always
is
about
happening
money, isn't it?
now.
Oh,
They were just processed and wasted no time on anything that was happening. And that's still going on. So injustices are not fixed.
yeah.
But we've made great progress. Great progress.
Because of people like you speaking out and not being afraid.
Well, the good thing about it is that that care home, that shelter, some place to go. It's an escape. There's a way.
Yeah.
It's the first time there's been a way. Because the children are what keep the women there. They can't take care of them, and they're told the children belong to the men. You can't have them.
Excuse me.
And they believe that, and it works because in the court cases, the men usually get them.
Yeah.
Even though they're polygamist.
Yeah. And it took you, I'm glad there's this care home. It took you 6 years to escape.
That's correct. So I'm really thrilled about this care home. The crazy thing about this video that she sends me, the lead-in that I finally get around to watching, I find out that I'm a spokesperson for that care home, and I'm pretty proud of that. So I didn't, that was cool.
Oh, wow. So how does woman, how does she gather herself up to escape? What was it that made you escape? What was the last thing that happened that I'm out of here and I don't care how long it takes, but I'm out? Can you take us through that process?
A few segments of that progress.
Okay. That's a big story, isn't it?
When my first child was born. First, I would like to define what a polygamist wife is.
Okay.
She's a woman that is born into polygamy. I didn't have any sister wives in the beginning. I was the first wife.
Right.
And because of that, I've had a lot of people say, well, you weren't in polygamy. No. If you are chattel in that lifestyle, in that religion, in that cult, you are chattel, period. Doesn't matter what number you are.
Right.
Okay? When my first child was born, I went to my mother and I begged her to help me escape. I had an uncle in Idaho that had been kind to me, and I thought if I could escape there, I could keep my baby. And my mother was so terrified that they might do something horrible to me that she turned me in. She'd rather have me punished than something worse.
Oh, my.
And she told me, she said, don't run away because you're underage. And if you run away, the law will bring you back to us. And we have to give you back to your husband because you belong to him.
Right.
So don't run away because it'll be worse for you. So I went back home, and my husband was irate because she had told him, and he said, you better not run away. He said, I'm going to tell you how bad things are going to get. You're going to be sorry that you did this. And he took my baby away from me. Now, I was breastfeeding her. She was just a few weeks old.
Oh, my.
And he took her away instantly, no breast pump, no nothing. He just took the baby away and said he was going to give this baby to one of his father's wives who was insane, literally. And so I was absolutely terrified. And I physically tried to take the baby away from him, and he threatened the baby. He said, remember, if I do something to this baby that you caused it, it's your fault. So he took the baby and gave it to this woman who was mentally ill. And the next few weeks of my life were just, I didn't know whether I was going to see my baby alive. I didn't know if she'd come back in one piece. They were just pure hell. Just pure hell. And I decided then that I had to get out, but I couldn't get out without my children. I would not leave them there. But I was so terrified then.
Yeah, I would.
That I stuck around for 5 more babies, not knowing how to get out. All of my children are girls. And with every child that was born, I'd hold my baby and weep because I brought another child into slavery. And I would tell her, what kind of a mama do you have? I brought you into slavery, and I know it, and you will never be free. And I hated myself. It took me 6.5 years for my husband to trust me enough. And believe me, I put up with things that are so wrong. I pretended to like things and love things that were so wrong. No matter what he did, he was marvelous when he was evil. For 6 years, waiting for some way I could get out. I knew that if I escaped in Utah, that I would probably be brought right back because so many of the the cops are polygamists, a lot of them. So, they're going to bring you right back.
Yeah.
Whether they are or not, but primarily there are a lot of them that are, so you don't have a chance. But I thought if I could escape somewhere else. So he took me and my 6 children with him after 6 years. He finally trusted me to California.
Oh.
He took me to Nevada.
Nevada.
We went to Las Vegas. He had a job there. I never got back.
How did you get out?
It took a long time. I thought that since the police were unsafe in Utah, they'd probably be safe in Nevada, because everybody said that the police were to protect you in Nevada.
Yeah, right.
Now, here I come out of Utah. I didn't even know who the President of the United States was. I didn't have any history that you have in your culture.
Right.
So I came into Nevada really extremely naive to the culture that everybody else knows. So I believed that the police were there to help you. So I figured if I went to a policeman, he'd help me. Right. Oh, that was the worst mistake. He told me I was psychotic. He'd never heard such a ridiculous story in his life, that he had heard women say horrible things about men, but that I was sick and I belonged to an institution. And he scared me so bad that I went back and I waited for 6, 7, 8 months, I can't remember anymore, not knowing what to do or how I could get away.
Right.
And one day, a newspaper was given to me. And on the front page of the newspaper, it said that Jack Juraski, who was the top psychiatrist in the state of Nevada, was coming to speak at UNLV. And his picture was there. And I thought, well, if I trade something that I have, I was always creative. I made quilts and crocheted and everything. If I trade something to my neighbor, maybe she'll tend the children for me, and I will go with this picture of him. And I couldn't afford to attend his lecture.
Right.
But I would wait in the hall till he was done, and maybe he would talk to me.
Right.
I did that.
And he talked to you?
He changed my life. He's the reason I'm free.
Woo!
He's the reason my sister is free and her children are free.
Fantastic.
He is the reason. And that's the story, all of it.
Yeah.
All by itself.
Wow.
But Jack Juraski believed me.
Fantastic.
And he told me what to do and helped set up a plan.
Right.
And he told me everything to do. And I did it, which resulted in him talking to Robert, my husband then.
Okay.
And then when he knew for sure, I don't know what he said to Robert, but Robert was willing to get a divorce and not say anything about it, and I got my children.
Whoa.
Because
thank you, Mr. Man.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah, no.
That doesn't happen. So, if there's heroes in this life, it's men like Jack Juraski. Jack was the best psychiatrist in the state and worth a lot of money, and he had me come to some of his classes, and I was paying a pittance, but a pittance to me was the world.
Right.
So I went to him, I said, Jack, I really appreciate this, but I can't afford this anymore. And he said, will you wait for me in the hall, please? And I said, yes. And he came out and he said, look, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I am not going to have it on my conscience that I let a person like you alone in Las Vegas. It's not going to happen. You're coming back. Money or no money, you are coming back. You promised me you're coming back.
Wow.
He changed my whole life.
Wow. And that's, paying forward with this, this shelter in Utah.
Yeah.
They can change so many women's lives. And, I didn't realize that the police were such a fear.
Oh, yes.
For these few.
It's more than that. When I was doing research, part of the research that I was doing was with Mark Shurtleff's office, the Attorney General in Utah. And I sent stuff. I had a woman in his office with a desk that took my stuff. One day I found out something I wasn't supposed to know. And I was rebuked and told that that was wrong. And I knew something was terribly wrong. And I never sent anything back to Mark Shurtleff's office. Mm-hmm. Later, Mark got out of office and he was replaced by John Swallow. John Swallow got up and said that he would back and support everything that Shurtleff was doing. He was going to carry on what he was doing, like not prosecuting polygamy or anything.
Right.
But I'd found out too much, and I realized then that Mark was having me send the information in so he could tell what had been found out. Since then, Mark Shurtleff, who incidentally ran for some pretty high political offices, He has been arrested. And so has John Swallow.
Good.
And there is a new attorney general, and they were guilty of massive fraud and involving polygamy, great payoffs, and people that were trying to get out of polygamy would go to a certain organization for help, and it was a revolving door. And that's what I found out. I found out that when they were going into a certain organization that was advertised to get help, that it was a revolving door, and then they could never get out. The people that were welfare workers and all that were tied in with them. And that was that. And I had several people tell me that.
Right.
And I let them know, and that's where the anger came from. But nobody gets that angry unless there's fear involved, because fear and anger are related.
Yeah.
When you
I agree
trigger
with
an
that.
instant anger, you hit a button that really is fearful for them.
Yeah.
And I know that.
So how can this shelter build trust in people where there has been no trust for these women?
If the women are like me, and they realize that if they don't get their freedom, if somebody else's freedom means taking freedom away from them, enslaving a person,
Right.
that has nothing to do with freedom, that's just plain greed. If they would rather be dead, if they look forward to death like most polygamist women do as a liberator, they do, I kid you not. I have sisters and half-sisters that just can't wait to die and get it over with, because their whole life is a sacrifice.
Oh my God.
Otherwise, they're no good. Everything's a sacrifice. But if these people can think about that and realize, and look at their children and say, you know, if I stay here, I'm already dead. I just haven't laid down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a zombie doing somebody else's bidding with my body, my mind, my talent, my ability, everything I am, have, or hope to be. I'm already dead. Hey, get real.
Yeah.
The things that are worth living for and the things that are worth dying for are the same things. We
right,
all
you're right.
live and we all die. Nobody gets out alive.
That's true.
So how are you
That's
going
true.
to do it? Are you going to do it brown-nosing and crawling and begging for some kind of acceptance from somebody that will never accept you anyway because you're less than human, because you're female?
Yeah.
You're already dead. I'm going to die someday. You know what? It's okay. We all die. I just hope I made some pretty big waves on the way before I left, because the only thing I leave behind is the lives I touched on my way through. Nothing else.
You have made not just waves, my dear, but you are a tsunami. You are a tsunami. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Out Here in the Redwoods with our special guest, Rebecca Kimball. She will be back to talk further about this, ladies and gentlemen. Aloha means hello, and goodbye. Rebecca, let's make some waves.